And welcome back to the Race Weekend in our second half hour. Time now for our Inside the Race panel with our partners at Politico. This week from Politico, we have White House reporter Adam Cancrin. From Scripps News, we have our political analyst Steve Schmidt, along with White House correspondent Serena Marshall and our congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed. Full house. Serena, to you first. Want to begin with your take on this Harris campaign. I mean, everyone I'm talking to say they couldn't be happier with this rollout. What has struck you about Harris's week one schedule?
Yeah, Joe, I mean, they cannot be more thrilled with this rollout. And I did have to Google that it's only been a week since President Biden bowed out of this race. But by every metric, the campaign is thrilled because if you look at fundraising totals, delegates, volunteer signups, engagement with young voters, they not only exceeded expectations, they broke records. If you look at the number of delegates coming to her backing within just the first 36 hours after announcing that she'd be at the top of the ticket, she had secured the delegates needed to take on that role. If you look at fundraising totals, in the first 48 hours, they exceeded hauls of, I think it was coming by Wednesday morning. The announcement happened Sunday, $126 million. To put that into perspective, that doubles more than what the Democrats, what the DNC, the Biden-Harris campaign at the time, had in the coffers in June. They had $96 million on hand, bringing in $126 million in just 48 hours. That's on top of other things like Act Blue, bringing in another $100 million. Looking at volunteers, record signups, the campaign telling us they had 28,000, volunteers after the announcement of Biden endorsing Harris. That is 100 times the amount of signups they have in a typical day on the campaign. And then you have to look at polling. And this is somewhere where they probably are hoping things will work and change to their benefit as more folks start to learn about who the vice president is. So far, it's still a head-to-head matchup. But if you look at what the vice president has ahead of her compared to former President Trump, being in a head-to-head at this stage only really works so far to their benefit because the vice president still has the DNC. She still has to elect her VP candidate. Both of those things typically go to a bump in the polls. Now, the Trump campaign is saying they're expecting a Harris honeymoon when it comes to polling. But the president, as for himself, he really didn't see a post-RNC bump. He didn't really see a bump after the attempted assassination attempt or the announcement of his vice president, J.D. Vance. So the Harris campaign, again, by all metrics, could not be more happy. They're going full steam ahead with multiple events over the next week as we hit the 100 days until the election. I think the next big thing that we're going to be looking at is who she picks for the vice presidential candidate.
Adam, to you, is there any sense of how much President Biden is involved at this point? Or is the Harris campaign moving forward saying, thank you, sir, for your service, but we got it from here?
And that's one of these huge campaign questions that's going to need to be answered over the next few weeks here is, you know, President Biden, obviously, a lot of drawbacks resulting in obviously him having to drop out, but he still has some appeal in these Rust Belt states that the vice president's going to have to win, Pennsylvania especially. He's a Scranton Joe, right? That's where he's from, and there is likely, strategists feel like there's still some appeal among the kind of white working class folks that Democrats are going to need in November. So that's still something that's going to be under discussion. You saw President Biden in his Oval Office address earlier this week talking about how, you know, he's determined to kind of run through the tape here, both from the White House and also on the campaign. I expect we'll continue to see him. He's not going to be in complete hiding, but there may be a few delicate conversations between the Harris team and now the president about, you know, how best to deploy him and how best to avoid ensuring that whatever negatives are associated with him don't then go and drag down Kamala Harris as well.
And at the same time, be respectful to the fact that he's the current president of the United States. So delicate balance there for the Harris camp. Steve, I want to switch topics slightly and talk a bit more about former President Donald Trump. Steve, what makes Harris a gift for Trump to run against? What makes Harris perhaps more challenging?
Well, there is no upside to running against Kamala Harris. Donald Trump had this election won. It was over. It was in the can. They were measuring the drapes in the Oval Office. And now there has been this infusion of enthusiasm and energy into the Democratic race. If it were tomorrow, Donald Trump would still be elected president, but she is closing. She is moving. She's ahead in Wisconsin. He will attack her relentlessly. This is going to be a campaign filled with racial animus. It will be ugly. It will be out of control. They will assault her record on crime, try to diminish her service as Attorney General. They will paint her as a pro-crime prosecutor. And the big issue in the election that still remains very much in Republican favor is immigration. Immigration, the economy. Culturally, they will try to make her an other outside the mainstream. The problem with that is she has the capacity to put together a type of all-American ticket. And at this hour, J.D. Vance is the most unsuccessful vice presidential pick, according to the polls, ever since polling began. And he is a disaster that is only going to get worse. So the Democrats have gone from a despairing position with no hope to all of a sudden the rescue ship pulled alongside and off it goes, and it has a lot of momentum right now.
Nate, want to shift to you. I mean, you're tracking how the Harris ticket may impact down-ballot races. You had an interesting exchange with Senator Tester from Montana earlier this week, one of the most vulnerable Democrats this cycle. I want to play it, get your take on the other side.
Because the process, we're in the middle of the process. It's not over with.
You're in the middle of the process?
Yeah. John, do you want me to block for you? John, people are calling. Bye, everybody. I got important news for you.
All right, Nate. So set the scene there. You were asking Tester his thoughts on Vice President Harris, right?
Right. I mean, we didn't even see Senate Majority Leader Schumer getting into his motorcade there. But, you know, obviously, this is, you know, a tough position for some Democrats right now. Mostly John Tester, given that he's the only Democratic senator who is seeking re-election right now, who has not yet endorsed her presidential run. I caught up with him again earlier this week, another time after that video. He said he's waiting for the Democratic delegates to vote. The DNC Rules Committee laid out the process this week. They want her to have a majority of the delegates certify that, do the voting online, and nominate her before the convention. So that's what he's waiting on. But according to the New York Times, you know, well over 90% of Democratic lawmakers in Congress have endorsed Kamala Harris. They clearly think that their chances could be boosted by her. There's definitely been a surge of enthusiasm. And what we understand is some of their numbers, their fundraising numbers, some of their poll numbers, though it's still early, are going up as well, given that she is now at the top of the ticket.
Adam, to you, let's talk the second gentleman, shall we? This is a unique, potentially, asset for the Harris campaign. We've never seen anyone, you know, we've never had a second gentleman before. So in your experience, what type of a political partner spouse is he for the Harris campaign with 100 days to go?
Yeah, I think if you ask really any Democrat about Doug Emhoff, they'll say, you know, he's been a tremendous asset for a couple of reasons. One, just incredibly comfortable on the trail, meeting with voters. You can kind of see he's got this almost golden retriever-esque affect to him. Really just someone who can go out there, is kind of disarming, and make the case in a way that's, you know, articulate, but also kind of appealing. The second thing, and we really saw this during the campus protests over the war in Gaza, as a man of Jewish faith, right? He has a particular ability to connect there. That's an issue he's cared very much about, and he's made it really a major part of, I think, what he's done over the last 3.5 years. I expect you're going to see a lot more of him. He's already kind of gone after Trump. He was asked about some of the early attacks on Harris, and he basically said, is that all he's got? If this is the kind of race they're going to win, that they're going to run, then they're going to lose. And so you're already seeing kind of him try out some of these attack lines, try out some of this more prominent role on the trail. I expect he's going to be seen as a real asset, especially in these swing states, especially connecting with younger voters.
Serena, Nate, Adam, Steve, a lively discussion on what has been a whirlwind of a few weeks in American politics. Thank you all. Still ahead on the race.